Welcome to the launch of Equi-Analytical in Australia. Thanks very much for joining us. My name's Jeff Collingwood and I'm the Business Development Manager within the Quality Services team at Feed Central. As you know, Equi-Analytical feed testing is the premier feed test for the equine industry. It's relied upon by the equine industry to provide accurate and reliable analysis of horse feeds for horses performing across a range of disciplines. Today marks a very exciting milestone as we introduce Equi-Analytical testing to Australia through our own Feed Central laboratory. Our affiliation with Dairy One and Equi-Analytical in the United States has made all this possible. We look forward to sharing how this new addition enhances our capabilities and supports our clients in achieving optimal nutritional outcomes. Feed Central is pleased to be able to offer horse owners and nutritionists the very highest standard of feed testing in Australia for them to work with. Once again, thank you for joining the webinar. Welcome to our panel of speakers. We have Tim Ford, Managing Director of Feed Central. We have Cassie Streeter, all the way from Equi-Analytical in America. And Sam Potter from FeedXL, and our very own Kimberly Detmers from Feed Central in Toowoomba. A little bit of housekeeping before we get underway. We will have a question and answer session. So our moderators will be receiving your questions throughout the webinar. And if you have a look at the top of your screen, you'll see a chat and QA button up there. If you can use the Q&A button up there to put any questions through. Alternatively, you can use the chat button. And throughout the webinar, I do know that we've got a couple of special offers coming through from FeedXL and from Feed Central. So today, we'll be hearing from Tim Ford, the founder of Feed Central. I'd like to share Tim's fascinating journey through the world of forage. 22 years ago, Tim embarked on a mission to revolutionise the hay industry in Australia. His dream wasn't just about starting a hay business, it was about setting a new standard for quality and reliability in feed supply. Thus, Feed Central was born. Over the years, Feed Central has grown to become Australia's largest online platform for buying, selling, and quality testing hay, grain, silage and straw. As people that use it know, it's not just a marketplace, it's a hub of innovation in hay quality assessment, boasting the nation's only nationally recognised visual system for hay quality assessment. Tim also established a state-of-the-art feed testing laboratory in Toowoomba. This journey has been marked by a strong affiliation with Dairy One, propelling Feed Central to set high standards for feed testing in Australia. Today, Feed Central enters a new era of capabilities with Equi-Analytical testing joining its suite of offerings, further enhancing its comprehensive feed testing solutions. So welcome, Tim. Hello, Tim.
Thank you, Jeff. It's great to be here. And I'd just like to give everyone that's attending today a very special welcome. We've got a large number of people online, and it's great that everyone could join us for this special event. I'd like to we're coming to you from Toowoomba on the Darling Downs, which is the traditional Jarowair country. We acknowledge the tribal and language groups of these people of this country, including the Jarowair, Gayabul and Jarowair people. We especially acknowledge the elders, past, present and emerging, and celebrate the success and achievement of Indigenous culture in this great land that we share. This is a very exciting day for Feed Central and Equi-Analytical. In 2013, Feed Central entered a partnership with Dairy One, who are the owners of the Equi-Analytical calibrations. That partnership has seen us, Kimberly and I, travel to Dairy One in Ithaca in upstate New York this time last year, almost to the day, where it was very, very exciting to be able to meet the team and see and experience firsthand the quality of that business and the quality of the people involved. Over the 11 years that we've had a partnership with Feed Central, with Dairy One, we have formed very close relationships and friendships at a personal level and at a business level. This has only been achieved through the great quality in workmanship and people involved in the Dairy One business. So today marks a milestone in that relationship where we're able to launch the Equi-Analytical calibrations on behalf of Dairy One here in the Australian market. We see this as a natural next step for our work here in Australia and in the Dairy One relationship. I'd like to give a very special thank you to the team at Dairy One and acknowledge the work of Jim Munro, the Chief Executive Officer of Dairy One, and also Cassie Streeter and the whole team at Dairy One. It's been wonderful working with you for the last 11 years. We have great staff in our laboratory here in Toowoomba, led by Kimberly Detmers, who will be speaking later on this morning, and a great team of great support people throughout the office and laboratory here. I'd just like to pay a very special thanks to everybody behind the scenes that has worked so hard, not just in getting the calibrations and getting the systems and processes up to speed so that we can do this test here in Australia, but most importantly to the people and everyone behind the scenes that have worked so hard on this webinar today. So I'll hand back to you, Jeff, as we learn more about the Equi-Analytical and launch the Equi-Analytical here in Australia. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Tim, and we look forward to the next part of your journey with Feed Central. Our next speaker is Cassie Streeter, looking at analysing feed for better nutrition. Cassie is joining us all the way from Ithaca, New York, and she's the NIR Services Manager at Dairy One Equi-Analytical and brings a wealth of expertise in feed analysis to our webinar today. Cassie oversees the Dairy One NIR affiliate network, which spans across more than 30 members in 16 different countries. Her leadership also extends to the internal quality assurance team, where she plays a crucial role in maintaining high standards of analytical precision. Cassie is a distinguished graduate of Cornell University, completing a Bachelor and a Masters of Science. Interestingly, her research focused on the genetics of equine metabolic syndrome, EMS, and PPID in the Arabian horse. Cassie has a love of horses and will share her insights into the world of equine feed analysis for improved equine nutrition. And a special thank you to Cassie. For us, it's 12 o'clock today, midday, and for Cassie and the team at Equi-Analytical, it's actually 10 o'clock at night, Sunday night. So thank you very much for joining us, Cassie.
Yes, thank you. It's 10 o'clock at night, but you know me, I'm always up for talking about horses and feed testing. So thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to be speaking. Even with the time difference, it's a lot of fun to connect with the Feed Central team and to be able to launch Equi-Analytical. So let me share here. So as Jeff and Tim said, my name is Cassie Streeter. I'm here with Dairy One, the parent company of Equi-Analytical. I've been here 13 years, and I've worked in NIR the entire time. And my little side pet project is always whenever I get to do equine related stuff. This is what I like to do. So the launch of Equi-Analytical to me personally is also very fun, as well as on the NIR side, that I get to expand services into Australia. So to talk a little bit about Equi-Analytical, where we came from, as I mentioned, our parent company is Dairy One, and really Equi-Analytical came out of the forage lab originally because Dairy One, as the name suggests, we primarily serve the dairy market here, mainly in the Northeast, but we branch all across the United States as well as internationally. And we were able to serve the dairy market, but there really wasn't much out there on the equine side of things. There were no equine specific labs. So we launched Equi-Analytical in June of 2004, which means that we've been here for 20 years now. So it's very exciting to see that. And in that first month, we had 16 samples. I'm happy to say that the business has really grown since then. And now here we find ourselves in 2024, we're averaging about 10,000 samples a year. At our slow months, mainly in early spring, we do about 600 samples. But during peak season, which starts in the summer, goes into the fall, as people are purchasing their hay for their horses for the winter, we can see a peak around 1,400 samples. So Equi-Analytical is certainly a success here in the United States. The nice thing about that is that we have been able to build the equine forages into our NIR calibrations, including representation of samples from Australia. And no exaggeration to say that Feed Central has been a big part of why we've been able to get that many samples and build them into our calibrations. So as been mentioned, we partnered with Feed Central starting in 2013. And since I've been here for 13 years, I was here for that. So I'm very familiar with the Feed Central team. And we have been primarily working in the dairy beef industry through our NIR affiliate network, where we license our NIR calibrations for feeds and forages to labs all over the world. And like I said, Feed Central has been a very strong partner in that. And as Tim mentioned, last year, I had both Tim and Kimberly on site, and we were talking about things, what are areas we can address in the Australian market? Where is there some need? And me, being the horse girl in the dairy world, said, how about horses? And thankfully, Tim just latched right onto that, and Kimberly jumped on board as well. So we've been working on it ever since, trying to, find where our customers would be. We receive a lot of samples here in the Ithaca lab from Australia, and it will take samples a long time to get here. So it really makes sense for us to branch Equi-Analytical into Australia to be able to serve customers there. But one of the big questions is, okay, so why are we testing in the equine industry? Why would we want to be testing our feeds and forages? The main reason being most horse owners are feeding hay. That is the primary portion of your horse's diet. So we should know what's in it. You may feed some supplements, or some horses are fed just primarily, it's just forage and that's it. It may be hay, it may be pasture, but forage is the base of the diet. And the Feed XL that portion we'll get into that much more in depth than I'll be able to cover. But it is the largest component, so we should really know what is in that hay that the horse is consuming. And why do we need to know that? Well, your horse's nutritional needs will change throughout their lifetime. So when you consider why you want to know what you're feeding your horse, there are things that change to be able to meet their needs. As they get older, their needs change. The condition of your horse, are they overweight? As I like to say, do they get fat on air? Or are they a hard keeper? I had a horse that was a hard keeper. He needed more calories than most. The workload. Also, the horse that I had was a racehorse. So his plane of nutrition was much higher than a horse that's hanging out on pasture, though he did transition to that as well. So his diet changed there. I'm not feeding him the same kind of quality of hay between full-time racehorse versus hanging out on pasture and just enjoying life. And the big one is the last one, disease, illness, or metabolic issues. As Jeff noted, when I got my master's degree, I was studying metabolic syndrome and Cushing's disease, or PPID, primarily in the Arabian horse. And I would say that most of the customers that we have calling in here at Equi-Analytical in the Ithaca, New York lab, their primary questions are centered around horses with metabolic challenges. They might have insulin resistance, or PPID, or equine metabolic syndrome. They may be dealing with an active bout of laminitis that they're trying to bring their horse back from. And that makes up, like I said, a vast majority of the questions that we're getting here. So that is a very big topic. Another reason you might want to test is, so once you've considered the kind of nutrition your horse needs, you might have to make a purchasing decision. What type of hay should I be buying for my horse. And if you're lucky enough, you might have some options and some choices. I know the folks at Feed Central will be able to tell you there's all sorts of hay out there available for purchase. So you might be making a decision, do I buy this hay or do I buy this hay? And you should test that hay before you purchase so you can buy the right hay for your horse. On the flip side, what if you don't have a choice? I had that with my horse. I had a hay guy who supplied me with hay every year, but the quality would change. I would get it from different fields, or growing conditions would change. I wasn't quite sure what was in the hay each year. It was always nice quality hay, but it did vary a little bit, protein, fiber, that sort of content. So if I can test that hay and see how it's changed over time, I can change how I supplement my horse's diet. Maybe the feed that I bought last year isn't appropriate for the hay that I'm feeding this year. So you can make decisions, even if you don't have a choice in hay, you can change what supplementation you're feeding to your horse. And that really covers the main points of why you would test. There are some breeding farms that are managing large numbers of horses with all sorts of different dietary needs. They could have 5 or 6 different types of hays on site. So there's a lot of testing going on there as well. But knowing what's in your hay is a really big component. It's high demand here, like I said, here in the US. So there are always 2 big questions. So we talked about why we test. That's always a big question from our customers. The next 2 are, what do I do with the results? That will be addressed. By Sam later to talk about what to do with your results once you get them. But then what I will address is, how do I take a sample? That is a very, very big question that we get all the time. So I will preface this by saying I won't go too far into the details here, but we do have instructions available for sampling hay and pastures. It's available on the Equi-Analytical website, and you can find full instructions there. So I'm just going to give you a little overview of sampling the 2 different types of forage. So with hay, the thing that we really push is using a hay probe or a hay corer. And the reason for that is it will get you the most accurate sample of the hay that you're feeding. A grab sample will likely underestimate the quality of the hay that you're feeding. So if you think about it, if you take a small square bale and you cut into it and you reach in and you pull out a handful, you're probably going to get the more stocky, high fiber parts in your hand. What I like to call the crumbly bits, it's my very technical term, is usually higher quality. Those things will break off, they'll fall back down onto the ground. You won't get representation of those parts of the forage. So that's why we really push using a hay core. My other favorite phrase to tell people when we talk about sampling is that we can accurately analyze the sample that you submit to us. Whether or not the sample you submitted to us accurately represents what you have is a different matter. So that's why we really push, a hay core or a hay probe, so you can get a nice cross section going straight into the bale. You're going to get all the different parts of the forage. And you can sample from multiple bales without doing damage. When you're doing the grab samples, you have to cut your bales open. Nobody wants to have to go and cut 20 bales open and leave them strewn about your barn. It's a tripping hazard. It's a hazard overall, and no one wants to do that. With a core, you can have your stack, and you can be going through your bales and getting a sample from each of those to make into a composite sample that you would submit to the lab. So we talked about this hay probe, hay core. So another question that we get that comes in pretty frequently is, where can I source a probe? So speaking for us here in the Ithaca lab, but I suspect there's a lot of overlap here, is number 1, check with your local ag extension office. A lot of them have probes that either they can lend to you. Some of them may actually even offer to come out and sample for you. It may be a shared club resource. Maybe you're part of a pony club and it's something that you purchase for the club and you can circulate around the members. Some farriers here in the States offer it as a service, which is very nice. They're already showing up on site. It's worth asking. Your veterinarian, especially if they have a focus on nutrition, may be available. One that I actually left off the list because I'm not sure if it's the same in Australia. I imagine it might be, is some of your feed companies are willing to come out and take a sample and submit it, because then they can take that analysis and turn around and discuss supplementation of your horse's diet with some of the products that they have available. So that's another place where you can get access to a hay probe or a hay core. Another option is you can purchase from Feed Central. We have the Penn State hay probe available here in Ithaca. Feed Central has a probe. I'm not too picky about what kind of probe you use, as long as it's got a decent diameter, you have good penetration into the bale itself. We're flexible on the type of hay probe or hay core that you use, but it is best practice to be using that for your hay samples. On the flip side, maybe you're not feeding hay. Maybe you're fortunate and you have a lot of pasture available that you can turn your horses out onto. So pasture is a slightly different matter. It's not all stacked nicely in the barn for you to be able to go out with your hay core and get your sample. So in this instance, what do you get to do? You get to take your scissors and you get to go for a walk across your pastures. So what you're looking for, you want to be cutting at grazing height, okay? You don't want to pull samples up by the roots. If the horse isn't consuming it, then we don't want to test it. We want to get an accurate representation of what your horse is consuming. So my second point, only sample what the horses are eating. If there are these nice, big, luscious green, spots of hay or spots of grass, but the horses aren't touching it, then you don't need to sample it. Only sample what the horses are actually going in and eating. And then in terms of sample size, I will stress with this a liter size bag. So something that happens in the lab, which Kimberly will touch on in her presentation, is when we receive samples in the lab, we dry them down. We dry them in an oven, and then we will actually grind them through a mill to get them into a nice homogeneous powder. Well, when you think about pastures, they're usually about 80% moisture. I've seen some go up to about 90% moisture. So by the time you take that nice liter-sized bag and you put it into the oven and dry it, you're left with very little material at the end. So we want to make sure we get that nice full liter-sized bag, especially with the pastures, so that we know that we've got enough material to test. So I wanted to touch on, here is the hay core that is available from Feed Central. I actually like this one a little bit better than the Penn State probe, because it collects as you go through. Not to bash it, I've had plenty of fun with our example hay probe here at Dairy One, going around and sampling people's bales. It is a lot of fun. You throw it on the drill and go out there and core a bunch of bales. So this is what's available if you are interested in purchasing. So once you have your sample, then we'll talk about submitting the sample to the lab. So as I mentioned, the liter size bag, it's good for both hay and pasture. We don't want the sample to be too large. I would say a gallon, but I guess that unit of measure in Australia. No really big bags, no bigger than a liter. We don't need, we don't want to overdo it. Plus, you're going to have to pay for shipping. So not that hay is very heavy, but pasture certainly can be. You're paying for a lot of water to be shipped. So a liter size bag is really the ideal size that we're looking for. Secondary to that is complete your paperwork. We've had a few instances here in Ithaca, and I'm sure Kimberly can attest that this has happened at Feed Central. Someone sends you a sample, you get it in. It's a really beautiful hay sample. The only problem is you don't know who sent it in. You hope that you get this beautiful sample, and then you get an angry customer calling, and they say, "Well, I sent a hay sample in." Say, "Okay, well, what does it look like? A hay sample?" I have about 500 of those sitting in the lab. So make sure you're completing your paperwork. The lab will never complain that you've supplied too much information. We never will. Your name, email, form of payment, all of that stuff. Make sure that you have that in your paperwork. And then I'll skip over the next point, but also include the brand name of the product if available. And the reason I say that is there are a lot of like hay cubes or hay pellets that are not just hay anymore. There are a lot of new products that have come out on the market that have supplementation already built into it. There are some additives. We had a sample come here at the lab, and for some reason I ran through the NIR calibration. I said, these results just don't look right. They don't look right. And they submitted and said, no, it's just this forage pellet. And then they supplied us with the brand name, and we were able to go and look at the ingredients, and it had flaxseed in it. And I can tell you that my hay calibrations do not have hay with flaxseed built into it. In that case, we would recommend that you have the analysis done by wet chemistry. But having that brand name can help us sometimes with troubleshooting or possibly recommending different testing that would be more appropriate for the sample type. Going back up to your pasture samples, keeping in mind that that material is, after you've cut it with the scissors, it's still alive and there's still respiration going on in that plant material. And your sugar, the sugar component within that sample can change. So it's a good idea. We wanted to try to arrest that respiration as best we can. So we recommend shipping pasture samples either frozen or chilled, just so that you don't have a change in composition as the sample is making its way to the lab. In the case of metabolic horses or insulin-resistant horses, it's really important to understand your sugar content. So we want to make sure that we're either freezing or chilling. It will depend on how long it would take for the sample to get to the lab. If it's going to be several days, then I recommend shipping it frozen and putting some ice packs in with the sample when you ship it. And finally, if you have some, maybe there's some unusual samples, or you've called the folks at Feed Central to explain the type of sample that you have, and they say, maybe you should have wet chemistry performed rather than NIR analysis. They can assist you with getting samples here to the US for us to test it by wet chemistry here in the lab. We have all of the core components, dry matter, protein, fibers, fat. We can test for your minerals, so you can do some balancing on the mineral side. But Feed Central can help you with getting those samples here, because since you're shipping internationally, there's an import permit that's required, which Feed Central has access to. They can also help with preparing the sample and getting it over here as quick as possible. We get packages from Feed Central on a regular basis, all the time. It's very active part of us dealing with U.S. Customs, sometimes getting those forage samples here, and it can get pretty complicated, but the folks at the Feed Central Lab are very well versed in processing samples. So to carry on with that, I will turn this over to our next presenter to talk a little bit more about the lab.
Thanks, Cassie. You've got an amazing depth of knowledge there that you've shared with us, and I'm sure there'll be a question or two for you later on. Our next speaker is Kimberly Detmers, who serves as the Quality Services Manager at Feed Central. Kimberly's role is pivotal in ensuring the accuracy and reliability of feed testing results, which are integral to optimising our clients' feeding programs. Her passion for agriculture was sparked at an early age, growing up on a property surrounded by cattle and poultry. And Kimberly went on to study a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Queensland, specialising in animal and veterinary bioscience. These experiences have enriched Kimberly's perspective and commitment to advancing agricultural sciences through precise feed analysis. Today, Kimberly will guide us through the Feed Central laboratory and introduce us to the world of Equi-Analytical, marking an exciting new chapter in our commitment to delivering excellence in feed testing. So we welcome Kimberly. Good afternoon, Kimberly.
Thank you for that, Jeff. So today I wanted to do the best I can to take you on a bit of a virtual tour through the Feed Central laboratory and take you through how samples are processed for testing. But before I touch on that, I want to firstly have a bit of a chat around what services we've got on offer through the Equi-Analytical. If you're an existing customer of Equi-Analytical, most of these services will be quite familiar to you. And if you're new to testing, you'll be able to find all of this information on the Feed Central website and also on our sample submission form. So don't worry about taking all this detail in right now, as I'll breeze through it a bit quickly for you. But as an overview, we've got NIR-based services. So The first testing service we've got here is the Equi Fast Track Plus. This is a very similar service to what Equi-Analytical's package is, their Fast Track package. But we do have a couple of extra results also being parcelled into this Plus service. So that's your lignin, fat and ash results will also come through. You're looking at a turnaround time on this one, 1 to 3 days. I'll go into a little bit more detail later on as to why there might be some variance there on the turnaround times. Next service there is the Equi-Tech, is quite a popular service. It's being released in 2 phases, 2 parts. So we've got the NIR component, and that's all of those results up until the ASH result you see there. Those turnaround time is the same as the Fast Track Plus, so that's that 1 to 3 day turnaround time. These minerals will be analysed via wet chemistry testing services, and from Australia, looking around a 2-week turnaround time on those. So you'll get 2 results emails in the end to complete the Equi-Tech service. We will also facilitate wet chemistry testing through the Equi-Analytical lab. So that includes the Equi-Trainer, the Equi-Complete, the Carb Pack, and any other custom wet chemistry services that you might desire. So we might be able to add on wet chemistry tests to an existing package, or you can build your own as required. So what we'll do is facilitate that international shipping and all of the paperwork involved to actually get that sample across to New York, and all the international biosecurity regulations involved with that. So the inter-lab processing, Feed Central supplies a free of charge sample submission kit. You can order that one through our website or give us a call to request one. That submission kit gives you sample collection bags, will give you guidelines on how to best take different types of samples, so haze or pastures or grains, etc. And then also provide a reply paid postal bag to submit that sample with, and the submission paperwork, of course. We need those details. So that makes the collection process as smooth as possible and gets the samples to the lab as smoothly as possible. We currently have samples coming in from all over Australia and from some quite wide-reaching locations, so nowhere's really too far, and they all arrive there into our southeast Queensland lab here. Upon receival, we assign a unique sample number to that sample you've submitted and note all of the sample data on that paperwork, and testing services requested from that paperwork is assigned to that sample number and tracks that sample the whole time. Once the sample's logged on our system, we will send out an email to confirm our receipt of that, give you an indication there on when to expect to see those results coming through as well. Next stage of the sample testing process, as Cassie mentioned a little bit earlier, if it's a high moisture sample, so that could be a fresh pasture, or we'll have some equine clients maybe testing haylages or silages, we'll need to dry those ones down gently in the oven to actually enable it to be processed through the rest of the lab instruments. So we keep a bit of a close eye there on the temperature, dry it gently at a maximum of 60 degrees, and that just ensures we're not cooking the samples or affecting the results in any other way except by removing that moisture. After the sample comes out of the oven, we go into our grinding room, and this is the biggest most labour-intensive time portion of the testing process, and it's actually also one of the most critical stages of the testing process. So what we're doing in the grinding room is we're reducing the samples down to a 1 millimetre particle size, and it's really quite a small size particle, and to have really good repeatability of results. When you're testing the same sample over and over, you're getting quite consistent results. And that's the importance of a 1 millimetre particle size. It's what most of the wet chemistry processes are testing to, and that's then also what our NIR calibrations are built on. So all samples, no matter if they're going for an NIR analysis or if they're going for a wet chemistry analysis, are being ground down into a powder-like phase. I'll now detail a little bit more into what NIR is. This is the testing service that the Fast Track Plus and the Equi-Tech services use as their base testing method. Near-infrared reflectance spectroscopy has been around as a testing method since about the mid-1900s. It's been testing forages since early 80s, so it's quite an established method of testing. And what it does is it's passing light from the near-infrared range into a sample and measuring how much of that light a sample is absorbing. So we can see here in this top image, this is a absorbance graph of near-infrared light. All these peaks and troughs are actually telling us information. What the calibrations does is translate this information into usable result and gives us maybe final output of dry matter or protein result. So each molecule has its own vibrational fingerprint, and that's what affects the different peaks and troughs that you'll see in an NIR graph, and that's what we're translating with a calibration. What we do to ensure our calibrations are up to date is we perform regular bias testing that's measuring our sample processing steps and also our instrument performance over time and confirming that these results are matching the master instrument which was used to create calibrations. So calibrations are developed by wet chemistry of hundreds or possibly even thousands of samples, measuring the wet chemistry result. Maybe that's protein, maybe that's moisture, and comparing that relationship to the spectral reading that you'll receive from the NIR machine. So really robust calibrations have that great number of samples, and Equi-Analytical are also performing calibration updates quite frequently, which we receive through from Cassie and her NIR team quite seasonally. That includes then over time any new varieties which might be hitting the market, seasonality of sample results or the locality of sample results are all being bundled up, and we're constantly improving upon the existing calibration set. So I've talked a little bit around the science of what NIR is. What does that look like in the lab? That's this image here on the left. We're holding a NIR sample cup, and that's a cup that we'll pack with the powdered sample. The base of that cup is a clear glass quartz, which allows the near-infrared light, when it's popped into the instrument, allows that near-infrared light to penetrate through the sample multiple times, and we get some subsample results there. The final measured result we get from the NIR machine is actually an average of those multiple little tests that are going on inside that sample cup, inside that NIR machine. Sorry. From the NIR measurements, we'll be able to pull together any of our calculated values. So, for example, horse digestible energy, that's not a strictly measured result, but it can be calculated out of the constituents that we have measured through the NIR machine. So that's our final stage in the NIR machine, is the calculation of all those values. Next phase then, after we run a batch of NIR samples, we will end up popping those aside for filing or for a period of 2 weeks there, and we'll have then on site a sample review process where we're looking at the expected range of results for a particular sample type. So, maybe we've run a loosen hay. Are we receiving results, or are we generating results back that a loosen hay looks like a loosen hay result that we're having come back? The second check we'll have is, are the calibrations reading the sample correctly? Has this sort of sample type been included in that calibration development? And if the answer to either of those questions is no, the sample's being flagged for retesting, and that retesting could occur either through the NIR machine again, or it could be needing to go for wet chemistry testing. Really interesting point this season is we've actually had a few loosened samples testing really quite high in protein. We flagged as odd. We ended up sending that through to Equi-Analytical just to confirm that these quite high loosened results was an effective seasonality. They did appear to be reading well to the calibrations, but we thought we'd better double check these, and we did even have our highest loosened protein result come back confirmed at about 28% protein. So wet chemistry testing is a good fallback to confirm that the NI machine is operating correctly. Another example we have at this sample review stage, or common review, is looking at the ash component of a sample. So the ash is the inorganic matter within the sample, and that can be affected by a few different things. So maybe some soil contamination or mineral additives. The NIR is really quite good at reading the organic constituents of a sample, and maybe not so good at reading the inorganic components of the sample. So an elevated ash result does lead a bit of credibility to the sample results if that's a bit high. And that's why also on the sample submission form, we do ask for any mixed feeds that you list what those sample ingredients are. And as Cassie said, that's a really good troubleshooting step for us in the sample review stage. Finally, after we've possibly retested our sample or confirmed that the results generated are accurate, reliable, we believe those results to be true for this sort of sample that's been submitted, we will email through the sample results to our client and also to any other nominated people they've popped on that form. So you can either give us a call or list it on your submission form that you might want, say, a nutritionist to also be CC'd in on those results, and we'll automatically send those results to them so they get that data in real time as well, and there might not be any delay in getting those results through from yourself to the nutritionist. The results at the same time are made available on the online Feed Central web portal in your unique login. If you didn't already have one, a profile is created at the first time that you do submit a sample with us, and those results do remain there for the lifetime of that profile. So if you end up maybe losing previous feed testing result email and you're wanting to check on the history of maybe a paddock of pasture over time, you're always able to log in and have a look at those results again and request those results again. That concludes my section of going through the lab. Quite a number of steps there. So if you've got any questions, please be sure to add them into the Q&A section. Over to you, Jeff.
Thank you, Kimberly. That was an absolutely fantastic presentation, and I hope that gives people a lot of confidence in what goes into getting a feed test result come out the other end, and hopefully people can see the collaboration that goes on between yourself and Cassie on a almost daily basis throughout the week to make sure that the calibrations are as good as we can have. Our next speaker is Sam Potter from FeedXL. Sam's a registered animal nutritionist, and Sam's going to be talking about making the most out of your feed test, and also looking at 2 challenging case studies after that. Sam's a distinguished equine nutritionist at FeedXL. Her expertise plays a crucial role in supporting and educating horse owners on all facets of equine nutrition. Sam first studied a Bachelor of Equine Studies and went on to complete a Master's in Vet Science, specialising in equine nutrition. Her research has pioneered innovative methods for identifying and measuring obesity in horses and ponies. Sam's competed at pony club and equestrian events and worked across various sectors, including racing stables, thoroughbred studs, and collaboration with equine vets. When I caught up with Sam recently, as we were organising this, I found Sam out in the paddock looking after the lambing season at home, and it was then I realised she's also a budding sheep nutritionist as well, managing metabolic diseases, of course, with sheep. So today, Sam's going to share her insights into the making the most out of your feed test with FeedXL, and then moving on to the 2 challenging case studies. So welcome, Sam.
Thanks very much, Jeff, and thank you to Feed Central for giving us FeedXL the opportunity to speak at the Equi-Analytical launch. It's great that we can collaborate and provide this information to customers. So today I'm mainly going to be speaking about making the most of your feed test with FeedXL and what that looks like. What I'm going to start with, Cassie, she sort of touched on some of this information, but I'm just having some technical difficulties here, so I might just stop screen sharing for a second and try again. Bear with me for one moment. And hopefully my slideshow will start working. There we go. So I first of all wanted to introduce FeedXL to people who haven't heard about FeedXL or what it is. So we like to say in its simplest form, FeedXL is an online nutrition calculator. So but we like to think that we're much more than that. We like to think that we're an independent source of information or horse nutrition information for people. We're 100% independently owned, so we've got, we've got no marketing bias that comes into our calculations or information that we provide. We want to give people peace of mind that you're feeding your horse as best you can. And also, it's hard to really know without putting something into a calculator like FeedXL what you might be feeding. So up until there, we're just guessing, but being able to pop it into something like this really gives you that peace of mind and a visual representation of how you're doing it. And in the end, FeedXL's overall goal is to have people with happy and healthy horses. So that's what we want. We want everyone to, enjoy their horses, for it to not be a chore, and to be enjoying the time with your horse. And also, we like to think that we're a community of knowledge as well. So we've got a FeedXL Facebook forum, which I'll cover at the end if you haven't heard of it, which is an excellent source of information where you can touch base or get in touch with people who are like-minded. So FeedXL is for everybody. So it's not just the horse owner. It can be professionals, so veterinarians, other nutritionists. We've got a lot of advisors who use FeedXL to balance rations. And for anyone who has balanced rations using an Excel spreadsheet, once you jump onto FeedXL, hopefully you'll appreciate how much easier it is. So Cassie touched on this, and it's why feed test, or the importance of feed testing. So the majority of our horses' diets does come from forage, and it should come from forage. So for most horses, that represents anywhere from 75, and some horses that's up to 100% of their total daily intake, which comes from forage. So when you think about it, if we're guessing what that component of the diet is, well, then we know relatively little about what is in our horse's diet or what nutrients are being provided in our horse's diet. It's also to ensure that we're not under or overfeeding. So you might be wanting to prevent a deficiency or toxicity, and also to save on feeding costs. So if you're really unsure and you're just adding a supplement and then another supplement and another supplement, they all generally contain nutrients which are being contributed to the diet. So we might not need all those excess vitamin mineral supplements or other vitamin supplements, mineral supplements. We might be able to just feed one which covers all bases. And the other thing that Cassie touched on, which I'm really passionate about, and one of the reasons why most people come to Feed Excel, is that they're dealing with a health management issue with their horse. So whether that be they're struggling to get their horse to gain condition, lose weight as well. So we have a lot of obesity, we have laminitis or insulin resistance, and we also have horses that have tying up issues. So with any of those issues, we really need to know what nutrients are being supplied by our forage so that we can really fine-tune the diet and achieve our goals with our horses. So whether that be to gain weight or to lose weight, that sort of thing. So I wanted to put this into a little bit of perspective on, well, what does that look like? So if I pop up some of the graphs that we see when we're putting forages into diets, then this is why we should be feed testing and what this looks like. So these are all a rye clover hay that I've popped into a diet. So this is Kenny. He's one of my example horses that I'm going to be using today. And he's a 550 kilo horse in moderate work. So I've put Kenny's details into Feed Excel, and I've put 2% of his body weight in hay per day. And these are 3 different hays and 3 different custom hay analysis. So as you can see, digestible energy varies throughout the hays. So if we were just to base it on, say, one sample or one generic sample, we might think that we're feeding our horse 90% of their daily intake or daily requirements for energy, but we might be as low as 75. So there's a big variation there. Now, I'll just move quickly through these. Crude protein's another one. The hay one, we're feeding a lot of crude protein and quality protein, but then the other 2 hays, it might be we're having to add protein to that diet to meet that horse's requirements, or add a quality protein source to that horse's diet. And another one is minerals. So with the main thing with forages that we see are variations in the macro minerals, or those minerals that we're providing in larger amounts. So calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, potassium, those sorts of minerals. So we can see here in the calcium, one hay is providing as much as 250% of that horse's daily nutrient requirements, and the others, or hay 3, for example, is as little as 80 or 90%. So it's a huge variation, and this is why we need to feed test, because it can be such a big variation. And as I just go through here, potassium, say you've got a horse that's got HYPP or is sensitive to potassium in the diet, then that's one of the things that we really need to know, is exactly how much potassium's in the diet so we can fine tune. Potassium is generally met within forages, or forages provide a large amount of potassium to diets, but for these horses, we're actually trying to minimize that. So we need to know exactly how much potassium's in there. Magnesium is another one. It can vary a lot in diets. So especially with our fast growing or our rapid growing forages, we seem to get a large amount of potassium and not much magnesium, which can cause issues. We see a lot of behavioural issues with horses with low magnesium in their diet, and this might be one of the contributing factors. the other thing is, so trace minerals. So generally, in Australia, trace minerals are deficient in diets, and that's because foragers don't supply adequate amounts of trace minerals in diets. So things like copper, zinc, selenium, iodine are some of the nutrients that we're looking to balance when we're providing supplements within the diet. And the other thing which is supplied in huge amounts, other trace minerals, are manganese and iron. So these are generally we're not wanting to supplement in diets. They're generally fed in enough amounts with your forage only. And lastly, sodium and chloride. So salt, is huge in horses' diets. We need to be providing salt, but for some horses, this might be just mean free access. And for others, we see deficiencies in sodium, particularly within diets, where we're needing to provide salt to meet their daily nutrient requirement for sodium. So next, just a bit of a change of pace, and I want to just show people how easy it is to import your feed test into FeedXL. So if I play this video, it will just run through. So the first thing we do is we go to the Feeds tab, and we're adding a forage. So hopefully my video is playing okay there, but we're adding, uploading our forage, a picture of our forage or a PDF of our forage, selecting the sample and going through and adding into the forage details. So with the quality of your forage, this mainly determines the vitamin content of the forage, because it's really hard to test for vitamins. What we're doing is we're just estimating vitamin content, and the way that we do that is based on its basically how stemmy or leafy it is, and also its colour. So once you've done that, it's quite easy, and the customer service team at FeedXL will be able to add that data in for you, or you can add the data in yourself if you're confident to do that. So here I'm just going in and adding the data, which I'll fast forward through a little bit. And so all the results in for your hay tests are actually entered into FeedXL on an as-fed basis. So we convert these into as-fed figures, so which would be generally around the 90% dry matter for hay. So we've added all those in, and we can save. For the interest of time, I've fast forwarded through that for you. And that's basically the addition of a hay into FeedXL. So it's quite quick there, and that's basically all you have to do, and then you can utilise that within diets, which we'll go through in a little bit. So I wanted to talk through some of the figures about when we're getting our feed test results. Sometimes it can be a little overwhelming. We get all these figures, which are wonderful, but what do we need to know? So I've done a little bit of a mini crash course in what we need to know, or what I'm looking at when I'm looking at a feed test. And so one of the first things that I'm looking at is the moisture and the dry matter. So this particular feed sample is an example, and it's quite dry. So most hays will sit around that, they'll sit between 88 to just over 90% dry matter. So I can see that this is quite a sort of a dry forage. It's quite mature probably. The next thing, and that's also really important for basically the hygiene of the hay. So if you get a hay that can be too much moisture, you can start to get some mold growth and stuff. So I do like to see a hay that is at least sort of that 88 to 90% dry matter. The next thing that I look at is the energy, which is called the horse DE in this. So the energy of the hay, it can vary hugely, and so if we've got especially if we're trying to create diets for performance horses and things, weight gain or weight loss diets, then this figure is really important. And so in this case, we've got 8.27, which is generally, like, I would say that that's about moderate for a grass hay. The next thing is protein. So this can be dictated by basically the maturity of the hay, and we can get quite low protein, which can be, which I'll cover in a little bit, can be, you know, a problem, and we can get really high protein, which is also can be a problem, especially for horses in hot, humid environments. We don't want too much protein in diets. This is probably about average, what I would say. The other thing that we can look at is the fibre component of the hay. So for horses, they're really good at digesting or getting the most out of really fibrous hays. So an NDF of or neutral detergent fibre of 60, 64, 65, that's okay. Probably if you were in the more livestock sort of, you know, game, then they would be saying that that's quite sort of mature, stemmy. But horses you know, their gut performs best on these really fibrous type hays. So for me, I'm always looking for something that's more up there. We can sort of start to see issues with colic if it does get too high, because it's got a really high lignin component. But that, for me, that's generally where they sit. With our lucerne hay, or prime lucerne hays and that sort of thing, our NDF can get right down to sort of around that 45, you know, mark, and that's quite normal. The other thing that a lot of people are interested is in the water-soluble carbohydrates and also the starch component. So when you add these two components together, we get what we call non-structural carbohydrates in the equine world. That's what we work on when we're looking at whether for diets that are, or design or formulating diets that are suitable for those that have got laminitis, metabolic syndrome, PSSM, those sorts of things. So if you combine these two figures together, we've got about just over 7% non-NSC for this hay, which is quite low, which is good. So even if your horse isn't sensitive to those sorts of to sugars and starches, it is really good to look at this figure still, because if you have a really high WSC, then that can indicate that the forage has a lot of fructans in it, which our horses don't digest very well, and they go through to the hindgut and can cause disturbances in the hindgut, and then that's when we can get behavioural issues. We might notice particularly their manure becomes loose, and that can be a sign that they've got some gastrointestinal disturbances there. And the next thing is minerals. So a lot of these figures mean basically not a lot until we put them into a program like Feed Excel. So we can look at it and say, oh yeah, that potassium figure's okay, I don't know, but let's put them into, it's important to put it into perspective of your horse's requirements and needs. So the next thing I wanted to do was going through creating, or what I would do to create a balanced diet for a horse. So basically putting the custom forage analysis that we've got, popping that into a horse's diet, and then seeing how we can balance that diet as well, or what we could do. So I'll press play on this and hopefully everything goes smoothly. So for those who aren't familiar, the first thing you'll do when you go into Feed Excel is you're creating My Horses and Diets. You'll then go in and create a new diet. So in the interest of time, I have I have created this horse already so that we save a little bit of time. And in Feed Excel, these are the details that you need to know about your horse. So we can change workload, we can change body weight, we can also change keeper status if you want your horse to gain weight, that sort of thing. And Feed Excel will make allowances for adding more energy to the diet. The next thing that we do is we go through the forages step. So we can enter pasture into our horse's diet, and absolutely we can enter a custom pasture analysis. But in this example, I'm going to use a hay just because it's a little bit easier. So in Kenny's diet, we're entering our custom forages to start off with. So we'll just work through the diet. So you can name your diet so you can come back to it at a later point. So we've got our custom forages here, which you can have access to. So I'll just enter that. I'd say 2% of my horse's body weight. So whenever I'm doing a diet, the first thing that I always look at is my horse's forage. So what's that providing in a diet? I'll then go next step. I know it's not going to balance, but what I'm doing is looking at what are the gaps in the diet. So is that digestible energy? Is that protein? Is that my macro minerals? Or, is it only my trace minerals that I'm looking to balance there? So you can see there from that diet, there was some digestible energy lacking and mainly trace minerals as well. So now I can go about rectifying that and adding in. So adding in a protein source, the way that I work through my diets is, we always look at digestible energy first, and then we look at protein, and then we look at our minerals and vitamins, and then we add salt. So as I'm working through the diet here, I'm just creating what I see as a nice diet for this horse. So adding in some lucerne hay, which would be fed before work, adding in some energy sources, so really nice grain-free energy sources, beet pulp, lupins, and also some oil will go in as well. And the last thing that once we've done that, we can then go back and assess whether the digestible energy of that component is being fed. So if you prefer to feed a complete feed, then in this instance, instead of putting in the beet pulp, the lupins, the oil, you would have just added in your complete feed. So we're aiming to get our digestible energy up to 100%. This doesn't necessarily mean that it always has to sit at 100%. You might have a horse where it sits at 95%, and that's where your horse maintains nice condition and that sort of thing. So there is a variation there. So here I wanted to demonstrate, I'm going through the supplement finder. Sorry, this is going really quickly. So the supplement finder is one of the features of Feed Excel, and it's designed to fill the gaps of a diet really easy. So if you've got no idea what to put in the diet, then the supplement finder can do that for you. So we can add in our SAMs, fill the gaps, vitamin and mineral supplement at the recommended rate, and it's adding it in there. And we can see when we press, I'll also add in, the salt while we're going, because I know that the diet's going to need a little bit of salt in there. We'll be able to see that the supplement finder has been able to recommend a supplement that meets those nutrients for this horse. So you can go there and just see. So when we're looking at that graph, we can see that it's all balanced nicely. There are some nutrients that are provided in excess, and that's quite normal. The main thing is that we're providing some of these we're meeting some of the most limiting nutrients, which would be iodine, selenium, copper, zinc, those sorts of things. So this is our nutrient table. You can, if you want more details about certain nutrients, you can go here. And you can also enter costs of the diet. So as a horse owner, I like to put my head in the sand a little bit about costs. So not everyone likes to do this, but if you are trying to reduce costs, it's good to give yourself a baseline so that you know, oh, well, this is what the current diet is. If I take this supplement, I'm going to reduce costs by, say, $1 a day or something like that. And the other thing is our additional nutrients. So anyone who's interested in joint supplements, feeding a hoof supplement, which has got biotin, that sort of thing in it, balancing omega ratios and that sort of thing, they're in the additional nutrients. We also have our feeding management notes, and the other good feature is that we can prepare a report for each horse. So if you want to say you've got an adjustment place and you're wanting to print these so you can put them up in the barn and know what every horse's requires per day, that sort of thing, then you can print a report and you can see exactly what that horse needs and that the diet's balanced. So that's a little bit of a crash course in Feed Excel. Sorry I had to whiz through that. I'm just really mindful of the time and that we want to have enough time for questions as well. So I'll just whiz through these two case studies. So we've got here the Easy Keeper. So we have a lot of people that have Easy Keeper horses and they're great until they're not great. And while they don't require much feed, they can be problematic in terms of managing them for weight, and also quite often they might have laminitis as well. So with these horses, we're probably looking for a more mature type, stalkier type hay. So when we're looking at the feed analysis, if you're say going on to Feed Central and looking for a hay, what would you be looking for? So Feed Central are great. They provide some figures and also pictures, and also give a description of the hay. So we can utilize that, plus what we know about the what we know on the feed analysis, to sort of guide us on whether this hay would be suitable for us or not. And sometimes we don't have a choice. As Cassie was saying, we have a person who supplies us hay, we get given that hay, and we have to sort of manage our horse's diet around that as best we can. So we're looking at this hay here in particular. We can tell it's got a really high dry matter, and also the NDF is quite high. So we can sort of see from this is going to be a quite mature type hay. And the other thing is that the protein here is also quite low. So I can see that's a really mature, stalky type hay. The DE on this, it's not as low as we would like for an Easy Keeper horse. Generally, if I can get it around the 7.5 to or below for an Easy Keeper, megajoules per kilo, that is, then that's what I'm aiming for. Otherwise, we do sort of have to look at other methods for reducing the energy in the diet, which we'll see in a minute. So the crude protein we went through, and water-soluble carbohydrates. So if we add those two figures together, we've got just over 11.5% of non-structural carbohydrates, and that's on a dry matter basis. So that that is still quite good if this horse has concerns around that. So if we put that into a graph, just at 2% of a horse's daily intake, so this is my example horse Daisy, so she's 600 kilos. So if we put 12 kilos of that into a diet, then you can see that the energy is still far more than she needs. If we were to give her 2% of her body weight in this hay, then she would continue to gain weight. Excuse me while I have a drink. But you can see that there's other issues with the diet as well. So we've got our protein is quite low. So if we don't provide good quality protein, we might get muscle wastage. We often notice that our hooves become quite poor quality, so they might become weak. And that's because protein provides amino acids within the diet, which are used for lots of different functions without the horse. But they're the two noticeable things that we might notice with our horse if we're not providing good quality protein. And the other things are our macro minerals, so calcium, phosphorus, and also our trace minerals, which we would expect being a forage-based diet that they're going to be low. So it go through all of those things. And the other thing about easy keeper diets is that because we're using poorer quality, or when I say lower quality hay, so it's more mature, it's more stemmy, it's often lower in vitamins. So for easy keepers, it is really important to look at those vitamins, particularly vitamin A, E, and your B1. So to rectify these things, I've gone through and created a balanced diet here. And the way that I did that, we had to reduce our digestible energy. And the way that I actually did that was I added in some straw. So we're starting to use straw a lot in easy keeper diets now because it provides a lot of bulk. So we don't want to limit our horses' intake because otherwise they get hangry, as we call it. So we need to provide, enough bulk in their diet, which is generally around that 1.5 to 2% of their body weight. Excuse me for a minute. And so we need to provide that. We also need to provide some good quality protein. So the way that we've done that is add some loose end hay in, and then lastly balance the diet. So I put this diet through once I've got my energy and my protein correct, I added this, press the supplement finder, and it presented the prized Easy Keeper product, and so I was able to pop that in at the recommended rate, and it balanced the diet nicely here. So I'll just so these are the steps I went through before. So the energy balance between adequate forage intake. We don't want to restrict that. Chewing is really important for these horses, for their mental sanity, but also gastrointestinal health. We then look at our quality protein, macro and trace minerals, addressing those, and then whether we need salt or not. So in this, with this particular hay, we don't actually need to provide salt as such, but we always provide free access to salt. The next case study that I did was a performance horse. So I got this wonderful feed test off Feed Central, and there's some really good quality hay and lucerne and grass hay getting around on Feed Central at the moment. So it's one of the most recent ones, and it's probably not entirely suitable to the Easy Keeper, but for a performance horse, you'll be able to see that provides quite a lot of nutrition. So you can see with this hay, completely different to the grass hay that we had before. We've got a lower moisture content, but also our NDF is down around the 43. So to me, this indicates that it's sort of a more in its vegetative, or like more of a like a cut at the sort of more of its prime time rather than when it become more late mature. And the energy, which is 9.85 megajoules per kilo, and the protein also indicate this. I'd say that this hay has a high amount of clover in it too, based on the calcium level here, which is at 1%. So sometimes we don't even see that with a lucerne hay, let alone in a grass hay. So this, if say you bought this hay and then you tested it and this is what you were stuck with, well, what do we do with it, the diet? Where do we go? So just putting this diet into FeedXL, looking at the graph just as it is, you can see that this hay provides the majority of this horse's the horse's details are there, sorry. This is a horse in moderate work. So you can see it provides a lot of the digestible energy, which is wonderful. If we can provide a lot of energy just from our forages, that's awesome. And then we have our calcium. So I said that 1% calcium is really high, and then you put it in perspective of a horse's requirements, and this is really high in calcium. So when I'm looking at the diet, if I was just to add a complete feed on top of that, which then supplied more calcium or added in some lucerne hay to this diet, we would start to get a lot of calcium provided, which can become problematic for our horses. And then we look at our other minerals that need rectified as well. So again, we'll need to fix up the phosphorus and also our trace minerals. So looking at fixing this diet up, it was sort of a little bit easier than the Easy Keeper. Because the forage is going to be providing a lot of this horse's nutrition, and at 2% body weight. So adding relatively little energy sources, just enough to top it up to 100%. So our sugar beet pulp and copper meal do that. And then I just pressed the supplement finder again, and it gave me the Conky's Orange Cell Perform at the recommended rate. And I've popped that in, and you can see it's the in the orange here. And it just tops up nutrients to 100% of that horse's requirements. So my top 3 nutrition tips here, I'll whiz through quickly. We want to prioritise quality forage for our horse. So we need to know what it is, and we want to, whether that be well-managed pasture, whether that be a combination of pasture and hay or hay only. I think that we should, a lot of diets that I see, the main issue with them is that they're not providing good enough quality or enough forage in the diet. My next thing is testing. So we need to really know what that forage is contributing to the diet so we can balance the diet. So whether that be testing your pasture across various seasons so that you've got an idea of those macro minerals, testing each batch of hay if possible, and requesting feed tests when buying hay. And lastly, we want to use FeedXL because otherwise we don't know what nutrient gaps we need to fill, and we might be overfeeding or underfeeding. So I wanted to talk about, just so people are up, FeedXL is now free. So because we've got this, we really want to ensure that all horses are getting a balanced diet. What we've done is we've gone and made our basic plan free. So you can access your horse's diet for free. You can only upload custom forage analysis on our standard and premium and advisor plans. So that's just something to keep in mind. And lastly, so visit feedxl.com. If you haven't been there before, you can learn all about our plans, everything like that. Contact us at support. We're also big on Facebook, and I mentioned the nutrition forum before. And also, as Jeff mentioned, all of webinar attendees will be receiving a free month on our premium plan for one horse so that you can try it out as well with all those premium features. So I'll hand that back to you, Jeff. Sorry, I've taken up a lot of time there, but hopefully people have found that useful.
Thank you, Sam. That was a fantastic presentation. I really enjoyed it. Me being a dairy nutritionist, I love the world of equine nutrition. One of the takeaways for me was that when you're dealing with low protein hay, it's not just a case of balancing the lack of protein, but you've also lost those really valuable spectrum of amino acids and minerals and vitamins in there too that you've got to make up. So to me, that was a really great takeaway message. Something else that also reminds me of is what should I feed my horse? And I thought, after listening to you, Sam, I thought, well, it depends. It really does, because you gave a great presentation, and there's a lot of twists and turns in formulating a ration for your favourite horse. So thank you.
No worries.
Oh, we're going to move on to question and answer now, I believe, and that's my abilities. The first one that comes up is one that's fairly straightforward, which I'll be able to answer. And how much does a hay corer cost? Through Feed Central, we've got one that has been designed by our team over the years. It costs $555 plus the postage. And if you go onto the Feed Central website and look to shop, you'll be able to come across all the different products available to purchase, and you'll be able to find that particular product there. There's another question there. I'll probably put this to Cassie. If you can't put your hands on a hay corer and feeding from round bales, can you hand grab samples from different rings and layers as you feed out? Or what is the best way of approaching that?
I mean, if the choice is between, doing a grab sample versus not testing at all, then yes, you do the grab sample. You just try to focus on trying to get the most representative sample that you can from your bales. Sometimes you'll have hay delivered that came from 2 different fields. So again, kind of keeping an eye on how you're feeding that out and getting a representative sample of what you're feeding to your animals is the most important, so you understand what they're consuming.
Back again, and for Sam, is Feed Excel still a useful tool if you're not feeding out any hay?
Yes, absolutely. We have generic pasture and also hays available in Feed Excel, and these were originally, the nutrient data for these was sourced from Dairy One. In the US, so a lot of our information, but what you'll notice is that it can't pick up those extremes. So yes, if your hay aligns with the average values, but if you remember back to one of my slides where we had a hay that was really high in calcium and then one that was really low in calcium, then your generic hay is going to fall somewhere in the middle. So it might not necessarily pick up those sort of edge cases. So I'd really recommend custom hay, like custom forage analysis if you can, but we do have a range of generic hays that you can use in Feed Excel, so it is still useful.
Thank you. And while I've got you, Sam, is Supplement Finder part of the basic free package?
The Supplement Finder, it's available on our premium plan. We also have a feed finder as well. So the Supplement Finder finds supplements and ration balances pellets, and our feed finder will find feed. So if your digestible energy needs topped up to 100%, but yeah, these are only available on the more advanced plan.
Thanks, Sam. I've got a question here for Kimberly. Of the testing suites we've got available, Kimberly, which are the best testing suites we've spoken about today for pasture and hay that can go into Feed Excel?
So really any testing suite is able to be plugged into Feed Excel. It links a little bit to how often are you wanting to test. Are you getting multiple loads of hay in and maybe you need to be testing more frequently, or are you maybe a bit more conscious of pricing? So you might go to a more basic testing suite for that reason. So the NIR testing is a really more economical choice and also gives you a quicker turnaround time. So if you're already feeding that product out, it's maybe results that you're able to use a bit quicker and plug into Feed Excel a little bit quicker. But it really does depend on how closely you need to be managing your animals and how often you need to be testing as to which plan might be the most suitable for you. If you're needing to really be balancing those minerals really strongly, I would be recommending more the wet chemistry packages for that reasoning. But if you're maybe just looking at the energies and the proteins and such, definitely those more NIR-based services will tick the box.
Thanks, Kimberly. This next question is going to go to Cassie, and it reminds me of when you're feeding dairy cows. There's always 3 diets. There's the one you formulate on the computer. There's the one you feed the cows, and then there's one that the cows actually eat after they sort everything. And one of our attendees on the webinar has asked, do you include weeds in the pasture sample for analysis if they are weeds that they are eating? That's a tricky question.
Oh, if they're eating it, test it. My horse had a predilection for dandelions. There was dandelion in the pasture, he would find it and eat it. So yes, sample weeds as well. We do have, I mean, the calibration is built on people that are, you know, just everyday horse owners, kind of from the general population of horse owners. And you turn your horses out, and yes, you assume they're just eating the nice grass, but then some just find the weirdest things to eat. Yes, that is something that you should include. If they're eating it, include it in your pasture sample. We do have representation of weeds in the sample. If they're consuming a lot of a particular species that's maybe a little outside of the norm, again, you can never put too much information on your submittal form. We have had customers submit samples here that said pasture sample, mostly weeds. And I appreciated that honesty. And there are some things that we've seen actually, I don't know, Sam might be able to speak to this. Usually your potassium tends to be higher if you have a lot of weeds. Protein is a little bit higher. It almost looks a little bit like the legume category, like alfalfas, lucernes, that sort of thing. So it's just a little interesting observation about weeds and how they test. But yes, include it for sure in your sample.
Thank you, Cassie. And as a follow-up question to that, if a pasture has 2 or 3 distinct grass species the horses are eating, do you need to collect them separately, or do you just do a collective sample of one and send it away for testing?
If they have access to the pasture and they're circulating amongst those different species, I would have them in a single sample. If it's different pastures that you're turning them onto, so they only have access to one type at a time, then I would submit them separately. But if it's a mixture that's out on the pasture and they're moving from species to species, then I would just combine them and do just one composite sample to submit.
Thank you. Sam, I have a question for you. What is tying up, and how do you prevent this with feed test results? What are you looking for in the test?
Yeah, great question. So there's a couple of different forms of tying up. So we have RER, or recurrent exertional rhabdomyolysis, and that's more the type that we see in thoroughbreds, so and nervous horses, that sort of thing, and it's more to do with some of the other things. It can be around electrolyte imbalance, hormones, that sort of thing. The form of tying up that we mainly nutritionally concentrate on with balancing rations is PSSM. And that's because PSSM horses, they're polysaccharide storage myopathy. They're more related to, or they're more similar to a horse that has insulin dysfunction. So they need a low non-structural carbohydrate forage. And that's because their muscle cells, they grab all the glucose and store it abnormally. And so we need to limit the amount of glucose circulating. And the way that we do that is providing not too much in their feed or their ration.
Very good. There's a question here that I could probably answer. To get the balance right, do we need to do soil testing as well? It's more information for you. I mean, you can go on the test of the pasture itself, but understanding your soils, if they're high in phosphorus or fertility, for example. So if you've got a lot of fertility near a dairy shed and the horses happen to graze on that, it's actually very handy to be testing that, because it's going to be a source of high potassium. So I'd probably be testing the soils just as background information to know what's going to be happening. I have a question here for Kimberly. It's on nitrates. Is there a testing suite available for identifying potential nitrite toxicities in horses? And just noting that the risk is lower than in ruminants, but they're interested.
Yes, so it's definitely a testing service that we do have on offer. The testing of nitrates, it's the limits are a little bit higher in horses than what's required in ruminants, but we have a test that covers both.
So we have another question on oxalate testing, and that is something that Feed Central is looking at. We've been doing some developmental work on that. Not ready to go to market with it, but it's something that we'll be able to offer into the future, which tends to come around on tropical grass pastures. Okay, and looking at that, I think we've asked or answered all the questions that we have there. So once again, I'd like to thank all our presenters and our attendees for coming along today. I've certainly found it fascinating to listen to all of our speakers, bringing a lot of expertise to what we do. And we hope that our attendees have gained some insight into the world of testing horse feeds, and certainly can put faith in Feed Central to do the Equi-Analytical testing. I do know that if you've got any questions whatsoever about analyses, if you do phone, you'll often get Kimberly, who can help you out for sure. We will be sending an email out to everyone following this webinar. Just want to remind everyone that there's a special offer that's coming out for the users of Feed XL on the premium testing for 1 month. That'll give you a chance to have a really good look at it and see if that's for you. And I think probably just truly appreciate the value that you do get out of upgrading a subscription, nutritional subscription. From the Feed Central point of view, we'll be offering all attendees a 10% discount on the cost of Equi-Analytical testing. So that'll be on the NIR testing and the wet chemistry testing that's coming through here. And we'll be able to provide you with the testing costs that we'll send them out to you as well in the email. So thank you everyone for your expertise in coming to the webinar, and to all our attendees, thank you for taking the time to attend, and we wish you well. All the best. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.